I want to be celebrating championships with Matt Barrows, who wouldn't be celebrating because he's a real journalist, but still he'd be happy. Good morning, Matt. How are you?
I'm well. I'm recovering. I'm recovering from a long week, but you're right. I'm not depressed or anything like that because I am a professional journalist.
You are very, very professional. I 100% am not. I am trying to not spiral into depression. It was a wonderful game, Matt. And, let me just lead into it like this. I just saw this come across the wire because everything, you read all this coverage. It's the magic of Patrick Mahomes. It's the final catch. It's Kyle Shanahan in overtime. Like all these storylines. And we keep kind of pushing like the defense was really good. I just saw this. This is insane. The 2013 Seahawks, I believe that was their Super Bowl year. We're talking about the most games in NFL history allowing less than 25 points. The 2013 Seahawks allowed 18. The 02 Bucks, remember that defense? 18. The 90 Giants, 18. The 2000 Ravens, 19. The 1925 Yellow Jackets, remember that swarming defense? There was really a buzz about them. Yeah, They had 19. Matt, the 2023 Kansas City Chiefs had 20 games in which they've allowed less than 25 points. Obviously, there's one more game on the schedule. I get it, but shouldn't a lot of this post-mortem be that this is in some ways an all-time great defense?
Yeah, and that's what you see when you rewatch the game, which I've done a couple of times. I mean, it's the combination, and it's simple. It's what it always is. It's the combination of good pass rush and really good coverage. And so you had Chris Jones, who was unblockable at times. They had a lot of trouble with Chris Jones. They had a lot of trouble with George Karlaftis. So those two guys alone supplied a lot of pass rush, and you had a very messy pocket for Brock Purdy. Half of his throws were under duress, which means like there was a guy in his face, a huge guy in his face on half of his throws. And then you combine that with L'Jarius Sneed, and then really Trent McDuffie stood out to me. I mean, Deebo Samuel would run a route, and it was like Trent McDuffie was showing him how to run the route. Trent McDuffie was running a better route than Deebo Samuel was. So there were no easy throws to Deebo Samuel all game. They played a lot of man coverage. So those throws over the middle that we've come to just expect from Brock Purdy, the beautiful mid to deep crossers to Ayuk, to Brock Purdy, to Deebo Samuel, those were few and far between. There were a couple of those. But mostly those weren't available to the 49ers because the man-to-man coverage, especially from Trent McDuffie, was so good, and because some of those throws were bad throws because he was throwing, he had a guy's shoulder in his face as he was following through. So I don't know. You could say, well, the protection was bad, and maybe it was bad at times, but this is what the Chiefs did to the Bills. It's what they did to the Ravens. It's what they did to the 49ers. It's just a very, very strong Chiefs team. And you're right. Patrick Mahomes gets all this credit, Travis Kelce, et cetera, but really that defense is what made that team special.
Man, I'm curious on your rewatch too, because I know watching it live, I felt like maybe the longest portion of the game where the Niners looked like the better team was early, maybe first 4 to 6 possessions. Total yards might have been something, I think, at one point like 90 to about 10 or 16, and it was 0-0. It just felt, I know, granted, McCaffrey fumbled on that first series, but it felt like maybe early the Niners really could have dictated the terms of the game more so in their favor than they took advantage of.
Yeah, that jumped out to me as well. Remember, we were talking about sort of sleepy starts against the Packers and the Lions, especially on defense, and this team was on it. I mean, they had totally gotten rid of whatever it was that was holding them back in the NFC games, and they were playing their best. I mean, they were playing really, really fantastic football. The issue is that the Chiefs almost rope-a-doped them. By the end, the game was still close, as you just noted, and the 49ers had run out of juice on defense. I mean, they were not going to stop the Chiefs. They needed and that happens in a football game. Defenses wear down. That's where you see most of the scoring. Fantasy football players all know that your fantasy guy has a very modest amount of points until the very end, and then he makes up for it in the last 5 minutes of the game. That's what happens, and that's what happened in this one as well. So, I mean, it was a fantastic start. The Christian McCaffrey fumble was big because it meant that the 49ers had no points on that really impressive opening drive. I do get the feeling, though, even if they had scored, even if they had gotten a bigger lead, this game was still going to be tight at the end. I mean, that's what the Chiefs do. That's been their MO for years, going back to their Super Bowl season 4 years ago. Patrick Mahomes was probably going to find a way to at least make it close late in the game.
Matt Barrows of The Athletic with us. Matt, we just went over this a couple segments ago. In this day and age, you have to look at social media with a grain of salt, but I don't know if you caught, I'm sure you did yesterday, John Feliciano and a couple others going at it over the idea that Colin McKivitz missed the block on Chris Jones on that very pivotal play where Brock Purdy couldn't get the ball off clean. Then Feliciano came in and alluded to the fact that it wasn't on McKivitz, it was on Burford to make the block. Number one, did you see it? Number two, do you agree with is that how you took what Feliciano was saying?
Yeah, and I think Burford also chimed in on social media and essentially took responsibility for it, saying, I think he said, I should have fanned out. He picked up the blitzer so that there was going to be a free pass rusher coming at Brock Purdy. But the guy who got there sooner was Chris Jones. So maybe if he had picked up Jones and then the blitzer came free, that would have given Purdy, the opportunity to, sidestep or do something. Who knows what would have happened? Bottom line, there would have been an extra rusher in there, but perhaps the right move was to pick up Jones and to give Purdy a little bit more time to find Juwan Jennings, who you look at that all 22 angle or the view from above. I mean, where do you have 5 yards separation? I mean, there was clear separation between him and the cornerback, and nobody between him and the pylon. So that likely would have been a TD. So we would go into sudden death if the Chiefs had scored on their possession as well. But it looks like Colton McKivitz is responsible, but really it's Spencer Burford, the right guard.
As we're talking with Matt Barrows, Matt, obviously we'll never know how it would have looked had a guy like Dre Greenlaw not suffered just the most bizarre of injuries. But what was your read on how it impacted literally the game, but maybe more importantly, just the team to have a leader like that, an emotional player, just get a freak injury?
Yeah, I thought that his backups played well. I mean, were they Dre Greenlaw? Dre Greenlaw was fantastic at the start of the game, and we were just talking about the energy with which they began that contest, and Dre Greenlaw is a huge part of that. I mean, he was making plays, and he was doing Dre Greenlaw things. Say again?
We didn't say anything. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
That must
I
have been
thought I heard a voice in my ear.
Oh,
But Oren Burks, I thought played pretty well. Not Dre Greenlaw. I thought Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles came in and he had a couple of nice plays as well. I didn't think that the drop off was huge after that. Everybody kind of points to Travis Kelce's first half stats versus his second half stats. They were using an array of different coverages against him. It was something different every time. So you can't just say that, once Dre Greenlaw left the game, Travis Kelce went nuts. It was a little bit of Greenlaw early on, but they had Logan Ryan on him. They had Charvarius Moore on him. They had a lot of Deshaun Gibson, a lot of Fred Warner on him. And things that they were doing in the first half just weren't working as well in the second half. But I don't think that it was all Dre Greenlaw related.
Matt, I've seen, on the record, and I'm sure you've heard both on and obviously off the record, but it certainly seemed like Steve Spagnuolo and the rest of the Chiefs were incredibly impressed with Brock Purdy, and it wasn't the whole gracious winners. Yeah, he's great. It seemed like that he got in their heads quite a bit during the game, despite the loss.
Yeah, and I talked to Spagnuolo before. I talked to him at that media thing on the Monday before the Super Bowl, and I had asked him a question about Christian McCaffrey, and he quickly changed the subject to Brock Purdy. So you could tell that he was very impressed with Purdy. He was really impressed with Purdy's movement. Remember, they were coming off the Lions game where Purdy gouged the Detroit defense for some long runs in the second half. So I think, they were legitimately impressed. I mean, like we were just describing, they had a really good game plan. They had the pass rush plus the coverage, and yet the 49ers were still kind of in the thick of things at the very end. I think it's notable that the Super Bowl MVP threw a bad pick and, was chased around early in the game. Purdy had more pressure to deal with, and he didn't throw a pick and threw some pretty amazing passes despite a lot of people in his face. So it wasn't a great game for him. I think the defense, gave him a huge challenge. I don't think any quarterback was going to have a great game in that scenario. But like I said, I mean, he did enough to put his team within striking distance in the end. So, Mahomes was the better quarterback. I don't think anybody's disputing that. But boy, I thought that Brock Purdy stepped up. I thought that Brock Purdy looked better in that game than Jimmy Garoppolo did in the Super Bowl 4 years ago. I think that the 49ers have to be very happy with what they have at quarterback.
Matt, the seasons kind of blend together. There's really no time to rest because they're going to be on to the next one before you know it. What's kind of off-season agenda number one for Lynch to do his best part to make sure this group is back?
Yeah, I mean, it's an older group. There's no doubt about that. They were the oldest team in the playoffs. I don't know how many of those starters were in their 30s, but it's a big number. So one of the sort of big picture things is to kind of figure out how do you stay as good as you are with getting an infusion of youth, because I think that this team needs it. Chase Young had a really nice game. Randy Gregory had a really nice game. Both of those guys are free agents. I think this team needs to figure out that other defensive end position. I think that's been an issue all season. I think it's clear now that as good as Nick Bosa is, if you really want to have an elite defense, you have to have somebody else there. The Chiefs have Karlaftis and Jones. The 49ers have Bosa, and sometimes it's Eric Armstead, sometimes it's Chase Young. I think that they need a more consistent presence there, somewhere along that defensive line, and probably the other defensive end spot is kind of calling out for a really consistent, good player, and that's something you need to figure out as well.
We're out of time, but Matt, I know you don't get into the odds thing, so just give me a philosophy. The Niners are the favorites to win the Super Bowl next year. Do you, based on what you just said and based on what you know about the cap and everything else, do you think it's fair to think that they should be if not one of the favorites?
I mean, the cap is what it is, and they're going to have to make some decisions, but they've accounted for next season. I mean, they can have at least most of that group back next season. So all that talent that we're talking about ought to be there. And, Brock Purdy is only going to get a little bit better. There's not going to be a regression from him. So, I mean, they should be. I will say that they did benefit from some luck this year. I know that Deebo Samuel and Trent Williams were out for 3 games together, and the 49ers lost all 3. But really, they didn't have a big, devastating injury throughout 2023, whereas they've had those in the past. So I'm not predicting it, but odds are that they're not going to have that same injury luck, have that offensive line together the whole season, et cetera, et cetera. So they did have some luck this year in that regard. You always got to wonder whether it's going to hold out 2 years in a row.
That's Matt Barrows. Matt, we appreciate you,
Yes.
my friend. We appreciate all the work you have put in for us this year, and obviously for all your readers at The Athletic. It is the well, I was going to say the best of times and the worst of times, but there's no best here. We lost, so screw it. It's the worst of times and the worst of times, but we love you all the same, and we say goodbye to you. Obviously, we'll talk near the draft. We always check in every once in a while between now and then, but enjoy your off season, and here's to another Super Bowl run next year.
Yes, thank you very much for having me on. I really enjoyed these usual Monday talks. I know today is a Tuesday, but the questions are always fantastic, and conversation is always great. So thank you for having me.
Well, we'll be almost. We're working on 20 years here soon, Matt. How about
That's true.
How sad
That's true. Yeah, we got to celebrate our anniversary next year.
Have a great summer, brother. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. That is Matt Barrows. Maybe we'll talk to him even in February.
We did.
Yeah, we did. That's right. We'll take a break when we come back. Quick break here, 1 minute. Last preview, Kings Suns tonight. We got some numbers for you there. And then Imran Palati, True Sports Cards. He has a show Saturdays 10 to 11 a.m. He'll be in studio with us. Don't go away. We'll be right back.